have kept on 7, so we'll go ahead and get this one started. Jim, did you see the one there? He was your Season 1 points winner.
Congratulations to him. Has it locked up coming into the Invitational this weekend.
Now with that, we're going to go ahead and start with Shaheen. He starts on a Temple of Silence. Now his mana base is almost all come into play tapped lands. He has the full set of 12 temples. Outside that has some basics and fetch lands. But
yep. A couple Radiant Fountains as well. Just a bit of life gain here in Urborg, some basics. But as you mentioned, yeah, this is...
And Jim trading with the Temple. Now Shaheen's win cons are more or less he has the 4 dragons and the 3 Narsets, and that's what he's going to be building up toward.
Yep, and that's pretty typical Shaheen. I mean, Shaheen 6 historically are not trying to sit on their heels and play just counter spells all day long. He does like to tap out for big plays.
You see him drawing one of those copies of Narset here. Both players just trading lands to start out the game. Shaheen with a lot of removal in this matchup. You see Utter End and Crux of Fate both in his hand to join that Narset. It'll really be on Jim to make his first play, but he's been pretty slow at that so far. Turn 3, just a Temple, and he still may not have a threat for the board.
Yeah, I mean, this is the problematic just guy start of nothing to do on turn 2, which happens. Usually the deck has something to do on turn 3, but it appears that Jim's drawn a removal-heavy hand, and this is a great start for Shaheen.
Yeah, so Shaheen will have his first play on turn 4, and this is one of the things I like about the Shaheen-style Esper decks, is that he is usually able to be proactive. He's going to crack both those fetch lands, play a Radiant Fountain, and I think start with well, a Planeswalkers, which is what you'd expect Shaheen to be doing on 4.
Yeah, with this style of deck, you know, you want to capitalize on the draws where your opponent's not doing anything, and if your hand's all removal, your opponent has time to just trade 1-for-1 with you while you wait for something big to do. Shaheen's decks are equipped with a lot of things to tap out, so if the aggressive deck's draw is slow, he can start doing things like this and really put Jim under a lot of pressure.
Yeah, so it's going to be Narset Transcendent for Soorani. Immediately goes up to 7 to draw him an extra card, and Narset, a card that's been talked about a lot out of the spoilers. One thing you can say going for it is this card is incredibly loyal.
Yes, it is durable for sure. Now, the biggest problem with Narset is the turn it comes into play, it doesn't really impact the board. Yes, it goes to 7 loyalty, but most Planeswalkers have a minus that impact the board. Narset does not. But on a stable board like this, where Jim's got nothing going on, Narset could do a lot of work.
Yeah, it seems like it'll be hard for Jim to be able to really take down Narset. 7 damage is a lot, especially when you're not a color that has a card like Hero's Downfall.
Yeah, Jim's going to have to, I would guess, just ignore this card and try to play through it, which is great news for Shaheen.
Well, Jim will get a card of his own. It's Outpost Siege. It's going to be set to cons, so that will net Jim an extra card each turn if the Outpost Siege sticks around. Now, Shaheen does have an answer for that in Utter End.
2 copies in his main deck. Really important catch-all, particularly with Outpost Siege being such a popular card.
One of the scary things is, so one thing about Narset is that her ultimate, which is a -9, makes it so your opponent cannot cast non-creature spells. Now, that's of a power that's high enough that if that emblem gets made, it's going to be difficult for Jim to win through it.
With Shaheen having as many removal spells as possible, and Jim's only got so many creatures in his deck to begin with, that ultimate is probably game over.
So the plus from Narset reveals Hero's Downfall that goes into Shaheen's hand, and then he plays Dragonlord Ojutai. So not someone just to sit back on his Planeswalker. He's going to continue with threats, making them diverse enough that this could be tough for Jim.
This is a disaster for Jim. He's got Manus Rider in his hand. He can't attack with a Manus Rider. That doesn't do anything. Shaheen can just block. Jim can't remove this Dragonlord Ojutai until Shaheen gives him permission to do so.
Yeah, it does have hexproof as long as it's untapped. So this Valorous Stance that Jim got off his Outpost Siege, that's not really going to do anything here.
So at this point, you know, Jim's probably got to start using some of those wild slashes to keep the Narset off of going ultimate, but this is big trouble for Jim.
See, Jim moves that Valor Stance over into exile. Not going to be able to play that one this turn. And he knows it. It was slow out of the gates and has paid a price for it.
And his hand it seemed fine from the opening. He had all of his colors of mana, just a lot of wild slashes and low impact cards that Shaheen doesn't really care about. And Shaheen was able to capitalize on that start by just getting his Planeswalker into play, getting Dragonlord Ojutai into play, and now Jim's in a lot of trouble.
Jim's going to have to just go for it, and even later game sets up a second Outpost Siege on cons and passes back to Shaheen. Shaheen will keep that under wrapped a bit here. Here's Utter End on one of the copies of Outpost Siege, and actually Shaheen -2'd the Narset to give the Utter End a rebound.
Yeah, not a bad thing to give a rebound to.
So Shaheen has that Utter End in exile. Going to go ahead and crack another fetch land, setting up with 2 mana here. And remember, he does actually have 2 mana counter spells available as you see him get blue. He does have that Silumgar's Scorn.
Pretty exciting. I like the Dragon Claws cards. I think they're sweet designs. They aren't subtle, but just encouraging people to just, if you're on the fence about what type of card you should play, go play a dragon. I think that's pretty sweet.
You see they're just leaving up the 2 blue, and he'll go ahead and pass. So a tell if Jim is expecting that out of Shaheen's deck. He may know what's coming. Shaheen has some options, though. He also does play Anticipate in his deck. You see Jim ends up Wild Slash will put Narset down to 4. Jim gets 1 more turn off this Outpost Siege before the Utter End comes back. It'll show Battlefield Forge. Jim's draw for the turn, Shivan Reef, so has plenty of lands to go around right now.
I know Shaheen just loves a card advantage game, so he's got to just be really feeling what this Narset is doing right now. Astronomy Hero's Downfall. It's setting up a rebound on the Utter End. It's absorbed a Wild Slash. It's still in play.
Yeah, Shaheen getting so much value here. The Dragonlord Ojtai drawing cards, Narset drawing cards, or rebounding other spells. You see, Jim going to try to remove the Dragonlord Ojtai. He does try to Valor Stance it, but here comes Silumgar's Scorn from Shaheen. That will protect the Dragonlord. It's a hard counter because Shaheen has the dragon in play.
Yep. Shaheen built himself a synergistic little deck over here.
Yeah.
Dragons and things that mention dragons.
With the mana down, it does give Jim an option, though, to take care of one of these 2 cards. You see, he had to Stoke the Flames, had to pick between Narset and the Dragonlord. He went with Dragonlord Ojtai. And then here comes back Shaheen. It's Utter End, and it'll take care of the 2nd Outpost Siege.
These 2 players right now are just working with such a huge disparity in resources. Jim has answered some things, but Shaheen's card advantage engine is just rolling along here.
You see Narset drawing Shaheen a copy of Dissolve off the top of the deck. No land here. He'll just pass. That's so dangerous on Jim's side.
Yeah, I think Jim is not much longer for this world here. He knows his hand's Madness Rider here. He's casting it into a Dissolve and a Downfall he knows about because he's just got nothing else to do.
Yeah, so Jim's going to just try all the threats in his hand, hoping that one of them sticks, though probably not very confident that any of them will.
No.
You see Shaheen with the Hero's Downfall, leaves Jim with 2 cards. Jim passes the turn, and Shaheen will end step Anticipate.
Another card I'm sure Shaheen is thrilled with.
Certainly is good with these style decks.
Yeah, you hold up your counterspell mana, and if your opponent doesn't cooperate, you do something else.
And if you want to talk about grinding, Shaheen -2ing the Narset and then casting Dig Through Time. That's going to give the Dig Through Time rebound. This is so many cards from Mr. Soorani. We'll see. I mean, if it resolves, Jim typically does not play counterspells in the main deck. It's going to be a 4-for-1 from Shaheen. You see, another rebounding Dig Through Time when he has another Dig Through Time already in his hand.
Yep. This is how you draw it up if you're playing a deck like Shaheen's. Your aggro opponent doesn't really do anything for the first couple turns, and that's basically the end of the game.
Well, what I'm impressed about here is Shaheen's ability. So we see a lot of these decks that are kill spells and card advantage. Sultai operates on the same level, but it seems like Shaheen's card advantage, he's getting so many more 2-for-1s and getting them faster than I'm normally used to seeing these control decks do.
There's just also no texture to it. You know, Shaheen with cards like Dissolve and Hero's Downfall can largely ignore whatever threat Jim's putting on the table. You know, he doesn't have to worry about getting caught with the wrong type of answer to the wrong threat. Utter End as well. He's just got clean, efficient answers to everything that Jim can bring to the table. And at that point, just the extra cards start adding up so much.
Well, you see the Utter End cast on Jim's 3rd Outpost Siege. Outpost Siege is typically a card that's really good in this matchup, but it just doesn't seem like it's even slowing Shaheen down.
Well, Jim has resolved 3, and 3 were absorbed by 2 Utter Ends plus a Narset activation. The Narset from turn 4 still in play.
Yeah, this Narset has netted Shaheen so many cards. It's drawn 2 cards off its plus. It has rebounded an Utter End and a Dig Through Time. You know, Narset has been, it's eaten a Wild Slash. She's been worth 6 cards easily this game.
Easy, yeah.
She draws a copy of Hero's Downfall there after Shaheen scries. And Jim nearly out of resources at this point. Shaheen with a full hand. Eventually, we expect him to end with one of these dragons. I believe how he has to win the game.
Yeah, he only has a couple ways in the deck of dealing damage. So, yes, it's got to be one of the dragons. And that's why you see Solmgar and Dragon Lord Ojutai being the choices. He's in the market for hexproof because he doesn't want to trade 1-for-1 removal spells.
Right. Yeah, Silumgar, the Fate Reforged Silumgar, the 3/7. And then
Drifting Death, yes.
Yep, and then the new Dragon Lord Ojutai. And pretty commanding performance, I would say here. The story of this game to me has been Narset.
Yes, this has been, I mean, it's the most hyped card in the set. It's a splashy Planeswalker. Looks like it facilitates some pretty powerful control decks. People are talking about it in Modern. People are talking about it in Legacy. And it has been overwhelming this game.
And here comes Silumgar. Shaheen waiting until he has blue up. Does he have maybe another Silumgar Scorn to go with Silumgar? It looks like he does. Thanks to the dragon in play, it is a hard counter. Jim just playing lands and passing back. He's going to make Shaheen complete the game. Shaheen will oblige him. Here's a swing for 3. Jim's down to 10. Narset pluses. That misses, but Dragon Lord Ojutai will join Silumgar, and now both dragons are in play.
At this point, Jim just trying to see cards out of the deck, especially with Narset revealing cards. Might as well make Shaheen play it out, and you might see something else that informs your sideboarding or something to know to play around for next game.
Seeker of the Way, the draw for Jim. He'll throw it into play. And end step, that'll get ultimate priced. Max Shaheen will take 2 hits to close this one out. See a Scry. It's going to go ahead and swing here. So yeah, ultimate price, the new kill spell for black decks here, at least the one that you can main deck. And you see Shaheen really going in on it. 3 copies of it in the main deck.
Yeah, well, you need to, with these decks, he needs to kill something on turn 2. You know, he can't say go, and then hope. And Bioblight's very hard to cast.
Yeah.
An ultimate price is a much more flexible, much more consistent removal spell than something like Suspension Field, for example. So that's why it gets the nod.
And the dragons come across for a second time, and that will put game 1 over in Shaheen Soorani's camp.
Commanding end-to-end win there for Shaheen. Jim's early stumbles were all Shaheen needed to overtake that game, mostly on the back of Narset.
So looking at their sideboard, one thing we noticed for Jim there is he was caught with a lot of burn in his hand, and at least when he's behind something like a Narset, the burn didn't really seem to matter. He does have more blue cards and more Planeswalker-style cards to go into off his sideboard, and I imagine he'll be using some of them here.
Yeah, he's got a copy of Treasure Cruise and Negate, a Valorous Stance, 2 copies of Disdainful Stroke, 2 copies of Erase, 2 copies of Sarkhan the Dragon Speaker, 2 copies of Peraz, 2 Arc Lightning, a Mammoth Spray, and a Roast. So the Treasure Cruise, the Negate, the Disdainful Strokes, and the Sarkhans easily replace at least the Wild Slashes. I think some of the Lightning Strikes will want to come out here as well. Jim's actually, the sideboard's tilted pretty heavily against aggro decks. He doesn't have a lot here, but just being able to improve on those Wild Slash slots is a big start.
Yeah, now he does have cards like Bramaz, but he's seen a lot of ultimate price out of Shaheen. Maybe not something that he can safely go to.
I think it's not very good here. It's slow, it's easy for Shaheen to answer, and yeah, as you mentioned, ultimate price probably just tips the scales too much.
All right, so going to Shaheen's sideboard, he has walk me through it.
A Virulent Plague, 4 copies of Drown in Sorrow, 4 copies of Encase in Ice, 2 Negates, an Ojutai's Command, a Pearl Lake Ancient, a Dragon Lord Slumgar, and this card that he's, I think that's his handwriting's too bad.
Yeah, well, he has
Stratus Dancer?
I believe that, yes, I believe so.
Okay, okay. A Stratus Dancer. I definitely like bringing in the copies of Drown in Sorrow in this matchup. And I also like bringing in the copies of Negate because these Jeskai aggro decks typically go long, more card drawers, more counter spells of their own.
Yeah, now Shaheen certainly, I think a lot of the players aware that Jeskai tokens would be very popular for this event. You see he is playing the copy of Virulent Plague on top of 4 Drown in Sorrows. Now, he does have Encase in Ice. That's not going to work in this matchup. It's not one of the red-green decks, but it really seems like Shaheen has been targeting a couple decks here. 4 Drown in Sorrows, 4 Encase in Ice. That's pretty big.
Well, Shaheen's decks, and he'll be the first one to tell you this, the place where his decks struggle the most are against decks like Mono Red Beatdown, because he's playing all these Planeswalkers. A lot of them don't impact the board the best way. He has a lot of 3-mana counter spells. He's trying to really capitalize on beating mid-range decks and other control decks. So if you look at his deck list over the last couple of years, most of the sideboard slots are dedicated to trying to beat decks like Mono Red aggro. So you see 4 Drown Sorrow, 4 Encased Knights. He needs to clean up that matchup because game 1, it's not going to be good for him.
All right, so this is round 2 once again of our standard invitational here in Richmond. Now, this is the end of season 1, which means the end of winter. So if you've been following us, Stars the Games proud to pronounce our Creature Collection in winter 2015. This is for all new products. We have them each season. So this season we had 3 Creature Collection and 1 in our parody series. So the Creature Collection ones, that was the Mammoth, the Wolf, and the Rat token that you see here, illustrated by Liz Nugent, who's done our Creature Collection series. And then we have 1 parody each cycle. This is the Eternal Witness, illustrated by Andrea Radek. Who will be doing the future Creature Collection products.
And all this is available on card sleeves, playmats, and dice bags. You can head over to StarCityGames.com/Creature Collection or head over to the dealer booth at any open, invitational, or Grand Prix that we are at.
All right, so as they go toward game 2 here, you mentioned one of the ways to get past the decks that Shaheen plays tends to be these lower end aggro decks. So to that effect, Jim's not... Though he does have aggressive creatures, but he still doesn't feel like that aggro deck you're describing.
Yeah, I think that in case the Ices may come in here as an answer to Mantis Rider, it's a pretty poor answer to Goblin Rabble Master, so maybe that's a card that Shaheen wants to bring in. I'm sure it's more for the mono red and the green red monsters matchup. That's more what he's going for here. But between Drown Sorrow and Encased Knights, he has a lot of options for low end beatdown decks, which I believe is where his deck's going to have the most problems game 1.
Yeah, and if you're not familiar with those cards, this is actually something we'll be seeing in a lot of the sideboards. There's a full cycle of these out of Dragons. They're these very efficiently costed color hosers, which hose the 2 enemy colors. Encased Knights is the blue one. It taps down permanently a red or green creature, and it has flash for 2. So effective, but you're right, the only red creature you want to tap down here is Mantis Rider.
Right.
It's not actually playing Stormbreath Dragon.
So yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of this cycle. They're all, assuming your opponent's cooperating and playing the right cards, they're all very efficient.
Yeah, they're certainly showing up in sideboards. Imagine all weekend we'll see some of them. It's an interesting card. I mean, it's not really a clean answer to Stormbreath Dragon either. Still lets Stormbreath Dragon use its monstrosity ability.
But Shaheen's got other way. You know, he's just trying to keep his head above water. He doesn't need to kill everything. Just defend himself enough that his dragons and planeswalkers can take over.
Yeah, that is where he's different than a lot of the Esper control decks you're used to seeing.
Yep.
Both players start the game by trading off on temples, reminding a bit of last game. And the story of last game, I think, really was that Shaheen had a 4-mana planeswalker before Jim had a threat on the board.
Exactly. Shaheen was on the play. Jim did nothing on 1, nothing on 2, nothing on 3, and that was the whole game. So it's really important for Jim to have stuff to do early.
And Jim doesn't want to repeat that one. You see on turn 2, he'll make Soulfire Grandmaster. Did have some pause there. He does have a copy of Valorous Stance in his hand, and I believe this Soulfire is his only threat. So if it dies while he's tapped out here, we may see a repeat of game 1. That said, I don't think he wanted to wait until 4 mana to cast the Grandmaster, so he's just going to play it out here and hope it sticks.
Yeah, at that point, Utter End or just getting overpowered. Planeswalkers, they're also answers to the Grandmaster. So just cast it. Just get it going.
Yeah, looks like the gamble has paid off. He gets to untap with Soulfire Grandmaster, and now gets to untap with Disdainful Stroke, Negate, and Valor Stance. It's going to be hard for Shaheen to kill this guy.
Yeah, Shaheen had his window last turn to answer this while Jim was tapped out.
Yeah, he did, and he had the kill spell, but just didn't take the window, and he's going to pay some price for it.
And I think that Shaheen would be fine if he was trading with something like Negate, for example, but Valor Stance is a hard card for Jim to cash in profitably. So that last turn is a big victory for Jim.
And so to stay alive, Shaheen down to 18, Jim up to 21. Jim's draw Bramaz, King of Oreskos. He'll keep hitting with for 2. We'll see at one point he wants to add more to the board. He is safe, relatively safe from cards like Crux of Fate. It doesn't look like Jim has more mana at the moment. So he has Sarkhan, another Valorous Stance, a Negate, a Disdainful Stroke, and a Bramaz. If he wants to go for another kill spell, he can go for the Bramaz here. Though Shaheen does have counter magic up. This is a risky turn for him.
Yeah, I think that Jim does have to cast this because it's just too cumbersome for him not to. You know, what else is he doing?
2 damage a turn isn't enough, really.
The problem with this play is the shields are now down for Negate. So if Shaheen goes, answer your Bramaz, untap, play Narset, Jim's in trouble. And that's the sequence that
Yeah, and you see Shaheen's going to use
Jim is most worried about.
Silumgar's Scorn not revealing a dragon. He'll just force spike with it.
Yep.
Which I think we'll see happen more. I think this Silumgar's Scorn I think is actually just a very good card in general. It's not unusual that he'll be able to catch players like this.
I don't think it, it's one of those cards where if you're playing with 0 dragons, I think it's probably unplayable. But
yeah, probably.
If you have a couple, it's probably good enough.
Shaheen, 4th land comes into play tapped. You see he had the option of playing Radiant Fountain and Ojutai's Command, but not gonna make that play. Ojutai's Command, a one of out of the sideboard that Shaheen has chosen to go with.
Jim is playing with enough expensive creatures that the Cryptic Command style counter your creature and draw a card mode could be a thing.
And at this point, Jim's mana holding him back. He hits for 2 again with Soulfire Grandmaster. His draw for the turn was another Soulfire, but he's just going to pass again with 3 lands in play. Wants to keep holding up those counter spells.
And no reason for Shaheen to do anything. He can weather the storm of these hits and eventually get to a spot where he can chain together multiple pieces of removal or multiple powerful cards and not have to worry about the one counter spell he can safely predict is in Jim's hand.
It will be a swing from Jim. Puts Shaheen down to 13. Ojutai's Command on Jim's end step from Shaheen. I believe it was just gain 4, draw a card.
Yeah, it's that Reviving Dose, I think, is the card we're looking. But whatever, it's one of those spots where Jim's not doing anything. So that Ojutai's Command basically amounts to 2 turns of Jim attacking, and Shaheen gets to do it at instant speed.
Yeah, and Shaheen's just pressing a mana advantage. You see Jim's last draw was Outpost Siege. Finally, Jim has hit land 4, though. It's Flooded Strand. But he's looking into 6 mana on Shaheen's side. He's going to have to be careful here.
Yeah, I think that Jim might be kind of in the trap here where he just has to say go and hold the negate mana, because if he taps out for something, he at this point can probably predict Shaheen is going to answer it and then do something big. The flip side of that is Jim just might not have the luxury of waiting because it's not going to get better.
Well, at 2 damage a turn, which is what he's been doing with Soulfire Grandmaster, he's gotten into some tough spots. For example, all it takes is Shaheen to play Radiant Fountain. He hit for 2 last turn, Shaheen Radiant Fountain. Then he hit for 2, Shaheen Ojutai's Commanded for 4 life. It feels like Jim's not even making progress, so maybe he's just forced into playing more threats here. But, trying to go the distance with a 2/2 is problematic.
And Jim might be looking at something like the Outpost Siege in his hand right now and say something like, if this gets countered or it's an utter end, at least it opens up the door for Sarkin. This is probably the splitting the difference play here, playing a second Soulfire Grandmaster, leaving up Negate.
Yeah. So he does play second Grandmaster. As you mentioned, he does have Negate up. He has Disdainful Stroke as well. So he has enough to do 1 counterspell. We're not sure Shaheen's going to let that one resolve. He's going to fetch in response. The second threat may force Shaheen into making a move. And it will be Dissolve. You see Shaheen does have Dragonlord Ojutai in his hand and another Dissolve. So Urborg here, Shaheen is 1 mana from being able to play both of those in the same turn.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to deploy the dragon until he can play back into the face of a Disdainful Stroke.
Well, he can do it if he has... He can play Dragonlord Ojutai. I believe if he has Silumgar's Scorn in the other card in his hand, that is a hard counter right now. If Jim goes for Disdainful Stroke, he's once again tapped out, so that pay 1 more will be enough. And Jim's have to go for it. Here's Disdainful Stroke. And yeah, Silumgar's Scorn takes care of Disdainful Stroke, and the Dragonlord is here to stay.
Yep. And this is an element of Shaheen's decks. He likes to pick his spots here to tap out. There is some risk Jim could fire back with something big, but if Shaheen avoids a big turn here from Jim, he should be in a position to take over the game next turn.
Well, he was really taxing the fact that Jim was short on lands with that turn. If Jim has 1 more land in play, for example, that line doesn't even work.
Yep.
Jim had a chance to resolve something like Outpost Siege, decides to hold up his mana here.
I think he's trying to take this Ojutai off the table now.
Yep, Ojutai attacks. Here will be Valorous Stance to take care of it, but Shaheen at the ready with Dissolve.
Being pretty aggressive trying to protect this threat, hoping that Ojutai attacking and getting through here will give him enough resources to work with and win the game.
And Jim, he cannot let it work. He's going to negate the Dissolve, and actually this all goes Jim's way. Ojutai is down.
You can see something that's working against Shaheen at this moment is his lack of blue mana. I mean, he does have 3 of it, which is a lot, but he can't dig through time in response because the Dissolve was all of his blue.
Yeah, well, if you look at Shaheen's blue spells, he has Dissolve, he has Silumgar's Scorn, he has Dig Through Time, and he has 4 of all of them. That is a lot of double blue cards.
Yep. So he's got Swamp, Caves of Koilos. I mean, the mana base it's good, but it's not perfect.
And Jim going to take an opportunity. He'll play Sarkon, the Dragon Speaker here, and that's going to attack for 6. This is a lot of damage Shaheen is taking.
And this is where it's a big cost that he couldn't dig through time at the end of the turn, although drawing Hero's Downfall here, very good for Shaheen, obviously, but a little inefficiency with his mana right now.
Yeah, well, he can't play Silumgar and Hero's Downfall on the same turn. He can Downfall and Dig Through Time. So I think that's the line he's on. He's going to instead start with the Dig Through Time, see if he can find a way to get 2 spells in a turn.
Yep, something like Ultimate Price here would play very nicely.
Yeah, he could Downfall and Ultimate Price. So you see here, Utter End, Anticipate, another Dig Through Time among his options.
Because against a deck like Jeskai Aggro, you don't want to take these hits for no reason. It's not like Shaheen can go down to 1 and be comfortable with his ability to lock Jim out of the game.
Remember, he already has 1 copy of Hero's Downfall in his hand. He'd love something that costs 2. Show Silumgar in those 7. Can't imagine he's taking another copy of that. We'll see. He's just looking. Mana seems to be the primary concern here.
Yeah, it bit him a little bit last turn, and now it's an issue again as he can't just take 2 downfalls, kill both of Jim's threats, and then try to win with the leftovers.
And 5 on the bottom there, so we'll see probably shortly what he kept. He's going to be keeping things that he wants to use right away. Maybe another copy of, I think it's another copy of Hero's Downfall and an Anticipate that he took.
Yeah, Shaheen predicting that he's going to have 2 leftover mana at the end of this turn, and Anticipate, and the shot of getting something better is better than any of the other cards he could have taken off the dig.
Ideally, he would have loved to have found, I think you said Ultimate Price there.
Yeah, that would have been the best one.
And he's going to Hero's Downfall there on the Sarkon. That was on his turn, so he's able to kill the Planeswalker. 2 mana up. But it's a great spot for Jim. I believe Jim will get to resolve this Outpost Siege or this Mantis Rider.
It's a tough spot because if Jim is worried about Disdainful Stroke or Negate, it's really attractive to play the Mantis Rider. But if he's worried about getting hit with a Sweeper next turn, then Outpost Siege is the more conservative play.
He's going to go for Soulfire Grandmaster hits. That means he's probably chosen Outpost Siege. Hits Shaheen down to 5, and the Siege does stand on cons. So knowing that would resolve, it seems like Jim took the risk, and it ended up being rewarded.
Yep. It's a big one again to play, which means that if Shaheen's able to answer Jim's threats here, Jim isn't necessarily out of the game. Shaheen either has to remove the Outpost Siege or lock Jim out of most of his actions with something like Silumgar.
Was an end step Anticipate from Shaheen. May have just found another Anticipate. Either that or a Silumgar's Scorn. Either way, it looks like he now has enough mana to play that Silumgar. I believe it was the Scorn that's left in his hand. So he has a counter spell and the Dragon. Yeah, it'll be Silumgar, the Drifting Death. And Baz back 2 mana up. If he chooses to fetch, it can be double blue. And here's a Stoke the Flames from Shaheen, exiled with that.
And I think based on what happened last turn,
Siege,
where neither Stoke the Flames nor Negate were available for Shaheen, I think you're going to see Jim try to go for the kill here.
Yeah, if he casts Mantis Rider, Shaheen can't counter the Mantis Rider. It would kill him to do so.
This feels just like too good of a spot to try to go for it.
And Jim's going to go for this greedier play, and I like this a lot. He's going to go ahead and activate Soulfire Grandmaster and then cast Stoke the Flames at Shaheen. So Shaheen can counter, but Jim's going to get back the Stoke the Flames. And Shaheen went to 4 to make that play. So great line.
Yeah, slightly better against a counterspell here. Gets to leave the Mantis Rider left over in his hand to go for next turn.
Yeah, now as the Stoke didn't resolve, Jim doesn't get the Stoke back.
Yeah, I think that Jim ended up playing this better. I think in his spot I might have tried to go for the kill on that turn, but this ends up working out very nicely for him, as Shaheen did have something to defend himself with.
All right, Hero's Downfall takes care of the Soulfire Grandmaster, but Shaheen can't attack just yet. He leaves back the Dragon on defense. Battlefield Forge for Jim off the top of the Outpost Siege, but he draws another land for the turn, and that land is a temple. Jim, Temple, and Mantis Rider facing down a 3/7. Plenty of life points on his side, just 4 on Shaheen's.
And Shaheen not looking to attack last turn with Jim's life total as high as it was, and respecting the possibility of some haste threat like Rabble Master or Mantis Rider.
And here is Mantis Rider. And if you're Shaheen, the thing is, because he has no really fast game closers, it does feel like he just has to grind this game out.
Yes.
So Silumgar will swing. That will give -1 to Jim's team, and Drown in Sorrow will seal it up. That's still remaining 2 points of toughness on the Mantis Riders. He takes care of that and deals 3 to Jim. Temple of Epiphany is flipped off the Siege. Another Mantis Rider.
And Shaheen leaving on top here probably means Counterspell or Dig Through Time. I think those are the cards he's looking for.
Mantis Rider swings. That is going to hit. That puts Shaheen down to 1. Danger spot here is Narset. That was the card kept on top. If he's going to grind out Jim, as we saw before, this is a great card advantage engine with which to do that.
And I suppose in this spot, Narset is the same as trying to scry again, because you get to look at the next card for free next turn anyway.
Yeah, Narset draws a Hero's Downfall. Now we'll see Outpost Siege showing Outpost Siege. What does Jim draw? Is it a burn spell? It is another Soulfire Grandmaster.
Well, at this point, Jim can just say, all right, set Outpost Siege to Dragons and send them on in.
Yeah, remember, with Shaheen at 1, that seems pretty reasonable. Shaheen won't be able to kill it.
Shaheen can respond with the Downfall, at which point then Jim can go ahead and set it to Cons and just try to outdraw.
So he decides the Downfall. We'll see what Jim sets it to. He may still set it to Dragons. He has 1 more creature in his hand. Shaheen doesn't have double blue up to just counter this creature. It's going to resolve.
Well, Shaheen's empty-handed too.
All right, so we'll see. I believe that second Outpost Siege is set to Dragons. Soulfire in play. Shaheen's going to attempt to draw out with Narset, but that doesn't work, and we're at a game apiece.
And post-board there, you can see Jim's got a lot more play against what Shaheen's strategy is. Jim has a lot of dead cards game 1. Game 2, he gets to cut them for counterspells and some high-impact durable threats like Sarkhan. And even though, again, Jim had some mana difficulties, and it looks like Shaheen was going to be able to leverage that mana advantage and just lock Jim out of the game, Jim was able to play through it.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because it seemed to be a game going according to Shaheen's strategy. He got to resolve a Dig Through Time, it got to play a couple kill spells, had 1 of each of his dragons. These are all things that he wants to have in the matchup, but it still proved to not be good enough.
Yeah, he got hit by the Valorous Stances in Jim's deck got to be cashed in for good work there. Got to protect a Soulfire Grandmaster that ended up dealing a lot of points of damage, was able to get a Ojutai off the table. And there's a lot of builds of, say, blue-black control or blue-white control where Valorous Stance is not a very effective tool, but with Shaheen having so much spot removal and trying to win the game with Ojutai, Valorous Stance was very good for Jim game 2.
Because of how good Valorous Stance is there, we assume that this is the kind of matchup where Jim actually wants to go up on Valorous Stances?
You can easily get too many of that kind of effect. And you don't know for sure. Shaheen, for example, could cut the Ojutais, and then your Valorous Stance is just 2 mana protected creature, which is not very good. But I wouldn't have cut any of them based on what I saw. I don't know if I would bring in the 4th, but the first 3 seem good.
That was our first Invitational of 2015. We have a lot of new things rolling out in 2015, including that is our brand new edition of Next Level Magic. So this is the book by the innovator Patrick Chapin. It's his 2015 edition. This has been completely redesigned in new graphics, new layout, and finally available in paperback as well as ebook. Over 400 full color pages. You can get this, as I said, either as an ebook or as a physical book. And find out more at starcitygames.com/NLM.
Yeah, the paper copy has been sold out for over a year at this point, so having it available again on paperback is very exciting, and of course, updated new 2015 edition, new examples, some new text from one of Magic's all-time greats.
It did seem in that game as though Shaheen got punished by Jim for a lack of just cheap removal there. Just a 2/2 for 2, ended up dealing more damage than I would have expected, I guess, against Shaheen.
Yeah. It's true. Was surprising.
If you look at it, he has 3 copies of Ultimate Price. And as far as removal goes, the cost less than 3. That's it. He has 4 downfalls, but on the draw, that can be difficult.
Yeah, part of how Shaheen was able to get ahead so effectively in the first game is by being on the play, just making his land drops. If Jim's on the play there and has something to do on turn 2, turn 3, Shaheen's draw is nowhere near as good. So being back on the play for game 3 is a huge deal. A lot of his answers are 3 mana, and a lot of Jim's threats are 3 mana. So that's very important.
2 mana threats seem to be really important on Jim's side. He does have Seeker of the Way in his opener, so he'll get to have another one of those. Question, I guess, will be whether or not Shaheen is ready for it. It'll be underway. Shaheen starting off on a temple yet again. Remember, it's kind of just, this is his early game strategy.
It's this plus anticipate, plus ultimate price. Keep the board clear, make your land drops, get a little bit of selection, fill up your graveyard with a couple spells, and then start gauging your good 3 and 4 mana plays.
Well, on the play, his Silumgar's Scorns actually count too.
Yes.
As you see here, he plays Polluted Delta, so he does have double blue up.
Even on the draw, Jim's got a lot of 3 mana plays. But on the play, you're right, it does get much better for Shaheen.
It's kind of interesting when you think about that, how there's a soft spot in Shaheen's deck for 2 mana creatures. It is really play draw dependent. You can count Silumgar Scorn on the play. You can count Ultimate Price on the play, or rather, you can count Hero's Downfall on the play. On the draw, it's just Ultimate Price. It's a lot harder for him to get a 2/2 off.
Yeah.
See, Jim has definitely embraced an aggressive role here. Seeker of the Way, Goblin Rabble Master, both in his hand. He's going to go for Seeker of the Way. We'll see if Shaheen wants to scorn that. I believe he does. Still keeps the board clear. And if Shaheen can answer Jim's first 3 threats here, Jim's hand doesn't have that outpost siege late game element to it right now. It's definitely just an aggressive curve of creatures.
And one of the cards in Jim's hand right now that he's stuck with is that Valorous Dance, where as long as Shaheen stays on top of him, it's going to be hard for Jim to get to a spot where he's playing a threat that matters with 2 mana up.
And here might be another window for Jim. Shaheen's going to go ahead and scry to the bottom. He does not have his white source available. And for Jim, he gets his choice of 3 drops, both Mantis Rider and Goblin Rabble Master.
I think that I like leading with the Mantis Rider because you know that Shaheen's removal is ultimate price. And if that's his answer, you might catch him off guard. Also, Rabble Master is probably a better follow-up in the event that Shaheen hits you with a sweeper down the line.
And so here's Mantis Rider, and they're barring Silumgar's Scorn, it's going to resolve, and it looks like it does resolve. Shaheen goes to 16, but his 2 mana play was Anticipate. See, it does find a Narset.
And this is step 1 for Jim. Now, you know, if Shaheen taps out to answer this Mantis Rider, then Jim can deploy another threat. If Shaheen lets Jim untap with a Mantis Rider in play, all of a sudden the Valorous Dance gets a lot better.
Yeah, this is what Jim wants, is he wants Shaheen to be answering the creatures on Shaheen's turn, not on Jim's, and he's succeeded in doing that right now.
Yeah. It's about who's in the driver's seat. And if Shaheen has to respond on his own turn, that means Jim is most likely, and the opposite's true.
Here's Downfall takes care of Mantis Rider. And here's another Temple. However, it does put a lot of pressure on Jim to continue to draw threats. If Shaheen just simply kills enough of Jim's threats, he may not, and Jim doesn't have a follow-up, Shaheen will steal the initiative back.
Yes. But he's got Rabble Master in hand, so he can keep going. I mean, Jim's floating out a little bit. If Shaheen's able to answer this one, he's running really low on resources, but this by itself can take over a game.
I say it's dangerous. Jim's hand, I believe, is Rabble Master Valorous Stance lands. So yeah, Rabble Master's played, Goblin Token gets in. Does Shaheen have 1 more kill spell? This is a pretty big situation.
I think his hand's just all big stuff. I think he can Dig Through Time or Narset this turn, but I don't know if he can play something in the board.
He's going to use Dig Through Time.
This is a huge win for Jim because it means the Rabble Master is going to be dealing a bunch of damage next turn, and more importantly, Valorous Stance is now at the ready to protect it from a removal spell.
And Shaheen's mana actually catching up with him a bit. I think if he had an untapped land, he could have made it Dragonlord Ojutai, and as gross as it seems, just traded it with Goblin Rabble Master. But because he didn't have an untapped land to make that play, he had to go with the Dig Through Time line.
Yeah.
You know, in this situation, I think Shaheen would have been happy trading the Dragonlord for the Rabble Master.
Oh, absolutely. So especially with Dig Through Time in hand, just trade, and eventually Dig will take you across the finish line.
As you see the Dragonlord hiding out at the front there.
And not only is this problematic for what the board looks like right now, but it really amplifies the value of Jim drawing something like Negate or Disdainful Stroke next turn, because Shaheen's falling behind on the board, and it's not clear he can handle his removal spell getting traded that way.
Yeah, well, it looks like Shaheen kept his cards like I think kept Utter End and Urborg off that Dig Through Time. And it may still work. Jim is on a lot of lands here. Now, Rabblemaster, to be fair, if you only could have one creature in play, Rabblemaster is probably the creature Jeskai aggro wants.
It feels like the whole game right now. If Shaheen can get it off the table, or even just block and trade, Shaheen should have the resources to handle the rest of Jim's action. If the Rabblemaster goes unchecked, Shaheen's just taking too much damage too fast to deploy the cards in his hand.
And we've seen Shaheen has boarded in some number of his Drown and Sorrows, and that actually gets around this Valor stance that Jim's sitting on.
Yeah, Drown and Sorrow is perfect here.
But Shaheen's going to need it very fast. Shaheen down to 9 off that last attack. He'll go up to 11 with Radiant Fountain. And does he have something like Drown? That's his only clean answer to this board. Instead, no, he's going to just pass the turn. So much damage from Jim that this unchecked Rabblemaster brings.
Though Utter End, a nice answer here.
Yeah, it does get it once again. It also gets around the Valorous stance. And Shaheen's going to start upkeep trying to ultimate price this Rabblemaster.
Have to imagine Jim's fighting over this.
Yeah, he'll Valor stance, make his creature indestructible. Does Shaheen want to fight further? He does. That's going to be Utter End on the Rabblemaster as well. And that'll take care of it.
And Shaheen can take a sigh of relief because the leftovers in his hand are really good.
Yeah, as long as Jim doesn't draw another threat, which Jim didn't, he hit Valorous stance. And for this fact, I think Jim's played this game really well. I think he was let down by some of those draws.
I mean, he's picked up these back-to-back Valorous stances, which have just not been more pressure, which is what he's really needed. So it is a bit unfortunate he's drawn as much land as he has from his side of the table, but he's also sided into a lot of reactive cards, and Shaheen can play the late game much better than Jim can.
That's true. So Shaheen now has gotten back to being able to play on Jim's turn. He plays land and says go. We go over to Jim Davis. He has drawn Treasure Cruise. It's a great card if it resolves. We'll start. Here come. It's an attack. And Ojutai's command is going to be cast on Shaheen's side. We'll see modes. Looks like he's gaining 4 and drawing. So going to go up to 13, down to 11 on the attack.
Yep, just trying to give himself a little bit more cushion where he can play one of his dragons on a life total where he doesn't really matter if it gets killed. He can start attacking with it, trying to draw some more cards.
Yeah, now he did that in combat to respect Lightning Strike plus Stoke the Flames.
Most likely, yeah.
Jim not going to pull trigger on Treasure Cruise just yet. He's going to make Shaheen answer these 1/1s.
Well, I just think he feels like Shaheen's got to have a counter, and Jim can't really win if the Treasure Cruise gets countered at this stage. We know that Shaheen doesn't, but he's been leaving up a lot of mana here and not doing very much. He's drawn a bunch of cards. Seems likely.
Dragonlord Ojutai is the play for Shaheen. He leaves up blue. That's certainly suspicious if you're Jim Davis. We'll see if he pulls the trigger anyway. Jim's draws Mantis Rider.
Well, at this point, you're never going to get the shields down for the rest of the game on whatever the counter is.
If it's Silumgar's Scorn, yeah.
Shaheen's going to be able to play Magic for the rest of the game and leave up 2 mana. So I think that was fine to hold off for 1 turn, but I wouldn't want to wait another turn.
Jim knows that the tides are turning here. Looks at Shaheen's graveyard in exile. He has Valorous Stance, Treasure Cruise, Mantis Rider, and now the last card was Flooded Strand. So this is all Jim's mana. Just has those 3 spells. 2 1/1s in play, but he's facing down this 5/4 Hexproof.
And Jim being very patient here, I think hoping to catch the Dragon Lord with the Valorous Stance.
Yeah, now the danger is Shaheen just drew Dissolve for the turn. He is going to go for that. Tapping the fetch land thanks to Shaheen's Urborg. And yeah, the freshly drawn Dissolve, that'll be cast at Valorous Stance. And that's going to work.
Yep. Now Jim gets to fire back with a lot next turn.
Yeah, he has Mantis Rider and Treasure Cruise. But because Ojutai is connecting, Shaheen is going to get to anticipate for free here. And that's a pretty big ability.
Fortunately for Jim, Shaheen did not find a counterspell. He just found Narset some lands here. So
Narset and Hero's Downfall both in Shaheen's hand. It's actually 11 apiece. Jim has to be aware of the fact that there's a race happening.
Yep.
Jim's draw was Seeker of the Way.
He can only be so liberal with the fetch lands against Shaheen's decks because he does, or the pain lands rather, because he does apply pressure. He's not the aggressor by any stretch, but Jim's life total is a bit of a resource.
All right, well, Jim's going to pull the trigger. It is go time. Here comes Mantis Rider. That's the first play. No counter spell yet. Now Jim's going to go farther. Let's see if it is going to be Treasure Cruise. Delves away the graveyard. Does this work? And Shaheen is going to Hero's Downfall the Mantis Rider before Jim gets a chance to draw maybe Valorous Stance.
Well, Valorous Stance is pretty bad for Shaheen regardless because it means the Dragon Lord's off the table. But if he's going to do it anyway, he might as well do it then.
Jim's draw, though, 2 more lands and a second Seeker. That's not a lot of help.
No, that was a really, really good window for Stoke the Flames or Valorous Stance to put Jim back to a little bit ahead on the board. But
yeah, the Goblins will swing Shaheen down to 9. Jim may just drop. Well, no, he's already, he may just drop both Seeker of the Ways. I don't believe he's played a land yet.
Well, I don't think he can. If he has to take a point of damage to cast it, I'm not sure if he wants to play the second one, because then it turns Dragon Lord Ojutai into a 2-turn clock. The flip side is that Jim might need a big draw or bust, and I guess that's where Jim's at.
Yeah, if he gets a spell, they'll have lifelink, so he'll buy himself that turn back, but you're right. It does make it a 2-turn clock now.
And a big play from Shaheen here probably beats Jim no matter what, so just take the risk.
And Dissolve was the draw from Shaheen. He has a second copy of Dragon Lord Ojutai in hand as well. Shaheen's got to be concerned here, though. This is 6 power on the board from Jim. And Jim is holding 1 card.
Well, Shaheen can kind of go now and just defend himself for a turn here. I guess this is also a fine play here with Silumgar to steal the Seeker of the Way.
Yeah, maybe it wasn't a second Ojutai. Maybe it was just Dragon Lord Silumgar instead.
I thought there was a possibility Shaheen was going to play Narset, Ultimate Price, and rebound it.
Sure.
And just try to block for 1 turn, but this is effectively the same thing. It's saying I'm going to block for 1 turn and then untap and take the game over.
Jim's draw was a Temple here. That is not what he wanted. And yeah, he does have to be concerned that he may just get lethal next turn.
Yep.
He is at 10. Sheen has 9 power in the air, so not 10, but not that far off. One of the dangers is that Dragon Lord Silumgar stole Seeker of the Way. Shaheen can actually use Jim's Seeker now to gain life.
Yeah, Shaheen's got a lot of really good options here. He wants to be cautious because he doesn't want to get tripped up and killed out of nowhere and have something critical get hit by Negate or Disdainful Stroke, but he's got a lot of very potent lines of play.
And it looks like it'll be Narset. That will trigger Prowess on Seeker of the Way. Narset starting at 6 again. And yeah, you're right, this Ultimate Price and Dissolve in Shaheen's hand. He can leave up Dissolve or he can rebound the Ultimate Price. Both seem decent here. I think the Dissolve is probably just his go-to card.
Yeah, it's definitely the safest thing to be doing.
Narset draws a copy of Anticipate,
and
so no rebound.
You still have access to your Ultimate Price in case something weird happens.
Yeah. And now here's the play here. Shaheen's just going to send Seeker the way. He wants 3 life points. Feels like he's in a pretty good spot.
Also, this sets up Shaheen to have a lethal attack in the air next turn, and it's the safest line of play in case Jim's got something big in his hand right now or is drawing something big next turn.
That Seeker of the Way crashes in for 3. Jim can take it or he can block it. If he takes it, he'll go down to 10. That means the Flyers will be lethal next turn. Looks like he'll just put a Goblin in front of it. That puts Shaheen up to 12.
Especially with Dissolve in hand, I think Shaheen can be pretty comfortable saying, I'm going to play around everything here. I'm not in any rush to kill you.
He's playing around everything, but he doesn't have to play around much of anything. Jim, with his draw as another land right here, that's not going to do much for him. Anticipate on end step for Shaheen. We'll find him. It looks like he has a dig through. Yeah, he had the option of Utter End, Hero's Downfall, and Dig Through Time, and he took Dig Through Time. That's a show of strength from Shaheen.
Oh, I think all 3 options result in a win at some point.
Yeah, they're. Narset is going to go ahead.
It's all good.
And rebound here. It'll cast Ultimate Price on the Seeker. And here comes everything. Jim chumps for the Seeker, goes to 1. An Ultimate Price is coming back. Shaheen gains 3, goes to 15, triggers the Ojatai, gets a card off it. And at 15, it's a pretty safe spot. Soulfire Grandmaster's not going to be enough, and Shaheen Soorani defeats Jim Davis in 3.
A lot of new cards on display in Shaheen's deck, and very impressive to have something week 1 incorporating so much new content into a control deck. Narset and Ojatai both doing a lot of work, and various Slumgars.
Yeah, impressive deck there for Shaheen. I think they're just pointing that Shaheen did have to perhaps rebound that Ultimate Price.
No, I think if you go back, I think there was a mistake that both players made last game when Jim used the Outpost Siege in the Soulfire Grandmaster. Soulfire Grandmaster only allows you to copy out of your hand. It's maybe his interaction that neither player
okay,
is
so if you're casting Stoke
off of the Outpost Siege, right.
So to be back, it's not actually in a legal place. What happened is Jim tapped 4 mana to activate Soulfire Grandmaster and then cast Stoke the Flames. So